I think all businesses nowadays are based on relationships, whether it's the guy you buy a suit off of, or the guy you have fix your car, or the person that cuts your hair, or the restaurant that is your favorite restaurant. It's all based on relationships. And developing those relationships is key to success.
Hello, and welcome to the Randall Osché Podcast, where honest conversations take the lead. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, artists, thinkers, and change makers to unpack how they got from there to here and what they learned along the way. Real stories, no filters, lessons earned through experience. So you can take what's useful and leave the rest. Whether you're tuning in during your commute, a workout, or while making dinner, we're glad you're here. So take a seat, relax, grab a cup of tea, and join in the conversation. Now, let's get into this week's episode.
Joe Orlando, welcome to the show. Joe is the president of Joseph Orlando Clothier and owner of Pazzo Italian Grill. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Randall.
Thanks for saying yes.
My pleasure.
So, a couple different directions. Some things I'm genuinely curious about, which that genuine curiosity is why I do the podcast, to serve my own needs and satisfy that curiosity. I love the idea of entrepreneurship. You've been at it for a long time with the clothing store and with the bar. I guess we'll start with the clothing store. How did you get started?
Well, my father, who is still around, he's 93 years old. He had always been in the clothing business. Before he opened his Joseph Orlando back in 1981, he worked for another men's store, which is no longer in existence. It was called Hughes and Hatchers. It was based out of Detroit. He worked there for 25 years. So he had a long, illustrious career in the clothing business, and he was pretty much an icon in Pittsburgh clothing. And he always told me, don't get in this business. So I didn't. So until he opened his own store, and shortly down the road, a couple years into it, he was struggling to find help. So he drugged me in, and here I am. And it's been a good run.
So 25 years in the clothing business for him, working for the other clothing store. Was it men's formal? I don't want to say formal.
It was a men's store. They had many stores, and he was a buyer for 17 stores in Ohio, Pennsylvania. I think it mostly is central in Ohio and Pennsylvania. They had them in all the malls. Monroeville Mall, South Hills Village, they had them all throughout Western Pennsylvania.
So I'm assuming he did that for 25 years, and then he's like, I want to open up my own shop.
Well, that's not exactly how it went. The company was owned by a couple brothers from Detroit, and they sold to private equity. And things started changing, and he could see that there were some troubling signs ahead, and his friend happened, the timing was good, his very close childhood buddy owned a building downtown, which was our original location, and he asked him, hey, you ought to open your own store. If things aren't looking good there, I'll partner up with you. And, that's kind of how it got started. And that was in 81. I think I joined my dad around 83 full-time. I was working there on every other Saturday because I owned a bar and a restaurant, and that's the business that I was in. But I just got married, and my dad said, the bar business probably not a good business to be in if you're just got married and you come rolling in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and
Fair point.
What
was the original location?
The original location was on Liberty Avenue, and it was in the 606 building on Liberty Avenue. I think you might have been there once or twice before. That's where our original location was, and after 35 years and many, many landlords, we had a new landlord, and they had different ideas they were not a town landlord. They had different ideas for the space we were in. They wanted to cut it in half. Long story short, they did not want to renew our lease. And so we scrambled, and now we were in the location we're at now, which is 300 4th Avenue, also downtown Pittsburgh, about a 5-6 minute walk from our old location.
And it was the original location. You were there from
81 to 2018.
That was the like first floor of the one PNC building,
right next to one PNC.
Yeah, I worked in two PNC, which is right next door.
Yeah, it was two PNC actually that we were next to, adjacent.
Yeah. So you start working with him in 1983 for various reasons. So yes. One of them not to roll in at 3 a.m. after the bar closes up.
Right.
Maybe take me through some of what was the learning curve for you, like going from, bar and restaurant business owner and having that philosophy of business is business to me. However, you weren't a buyer of clothing. I'm sure you were aware of it, via your father.
Sure.
But what was some of the challenges or differences between running your own bar and restaurant to then working with your father at the clothing store in 1983?
Yeah, I guess I should preface it by saying that when I was in high school, in the summertime, I worked, and even after school, I worked at the store that he worked for, Hughes and Hatchers. However, they had a nepotism law in place. So the shoe department was a separate entity. It was like a lease department. So I was allowed to work in there. I was not allowed to work in the clothing part of the store. So I did that for a couple years after school. And then after high school, I did it for about a year. And that's kind of when I transitioned into starting a friend of mine. We partnered up and started our own business. And then the transition to work for my dad was, the clothing industry. I knew some about it, but I didn't really know all the inner workings of it. So he kind of schooled me on it. And it came fairly naturally, being exposed to clothing throughout my whole life with him, kind of had that innate part of me that knew what something was nice and when something maybe wasn't so nice. And so that's kind of how it started. I guess the biggest adjustment was being my own boss for about 7 years and then all of a sudden working for my dad.
These interviews often sort of bounce all over the place.
Sure.
So sorry. So besides working for your father, which he was an entrepreneur and he had his own store, I would still consider that like entrepreneurship because you guys were in it together. Have you, outside of the high school job and working for the same company as your father, have you ever worked for anybody besides yourself?
No.
I guess my theory that I'm trying to explore is that if you're exposed to entrepreneurship, you're more inclined to be an entrepreneur as you're younger. Like if you're exposed, if your parents are, bankers, I think you're more inclined to become a banker, right?
Yeah,
so what was your thoughts about like deciding on how you wanted to create a career for yourself and what direction that might have taken?
Well, it's a pretty interesting story, really. I mean, after high school, I decided that I was going to take a year off and decide what I wanted to do about going into college. And I had a friend of mine, a high school friend, who had a Division I scholarship to play football at a Division I school. And he was a running back. In the first week of practice, he tore his knee up. Back in 1974, if you tore your knee up, you were done. Your career was basically over. Fast forward, he flunked out of college, came back to Pittsburgh. We started hanging around and commiserating and decided we both had jobs. I was working for the company that my dad worked for. And basically, we decided we were going to open a pizza shop. And we found this great location. However, the owner of the plaza that we were in was a lumber company. And this guy said, wait a minute, I'm not going to have two 19-year-old kids open a pizza shop next to my lumber company and burn my lumber company. Honest to God, that was a true story. And we were two guys with zero experience. We were 19 years old. We were sitting around and we said, well, we like to go into bars even though we're 19. We've been in a lot of bars, and why don't we open a bar? Because we're experts, And long story short, we saw an ad in the newspaper, one ads when they used to do stuff like that. We saw this bar for sale. It was in an area called McKeesport, which is a steel town. And I think it's pretty, I don't know for sure, Randall, but I'm pretty sure that my partner and I were the youngest liquor license owners in the state of Pennsylvania, maybe history, because we were 19 and I don't even know how we did it. I mean, and I know you can't do it today. We bought this liquor license. We were 19 years old. By the time the transfer went through, we were 20. For a year, we owned this bar across from the steel mill that these mill workers would come in every day. Hey, kid, are you the owner? Yeah, I'm the owner. Let me buy you a drink. You can't. Why? I'm not old enough. What? So that's kind of how it's a pretty interesting story, and one that I don't think has been repeated too often in the annals of history, at least in Western Pennsylvania. But actually, I was an entrepreneur before my dad in many respects, because we owned that place for 7 years before I went to work for my dad, before he opened his own place.
Another sort of theme I have, or a hypothesis probably better classifies this thought, is that a lot of things have changed since, like, over time when you started your first bar restaurant to 2025. I think, I'm not an economist, but just in my career, since I started my career to where I'm at now, which I started my career like 2009-ish, I've seen like significant changes like in the economy and buying power. One of the things from, my experience as a living human being, right? And in like what I've read, I'm a pretty avid reader, is that the like buying power has gone down, right? So prices over time have increased significantly, and wages have not kept up with those price increases. So the delta between the two has gotten increasingly larger over the last probably 40, 50 years, something like that. You used to be able to go to a 4-year college and pay a couple $1,000s, like sure, probably in the 70s. Now that's 40,000 on the low side, hundreds of thousands on the high side.
For sure.
So if you're comfortable with sharing, like what was the startup cost of that bar?
$12,000, split in half, $6,000 a piece. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but back then it was, I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I had to go to the bank and get it, and they wouldn't lend it to me, so my father actually had to co-sign the loan for that.
So for context purposes, you were able to get a loan. Your father was
with him co-signing, yes.
With him. And you remember the term of the loan?
I am going to say that it was 5 years. It could have been, it wasn't much more than that. And my partner had to do the same thing. He had to go get his dad, because banks aren't going to lend a 19-year-old kid money for, of all things, a bar, let alone a car.
Yeah. Was it a personal loan? Or? It
was through the precursor to PNC Bank. It was Pittsburgh National Bank, and it was just a standard loan.
Yeah. I mean, from my banking experience, I guess like banks don't lend money for people to start businesses. I mean, yeah.
That was a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, I guess another thing how I'm thinking about it is, I don't want to say it was easier, right? But you were able to get the funding from a financial institution to start a business.
Right.
And that does not exist any longer.
Especially today, and this was for a bar restaurant, those guys, no bank will lend you anything when it comes to that kind of a business, because the fail rate is so high.
Yeah. For context, how hard was it to make that monthly payment? Was it like a couple $100s and you could do that, like make that kind of revenue in a couple days at the restaurant?
It was so long ago, Randall. I don't remember what the payment was, but I know the threat of my dad co-signing it. I didn't miss a payment.
Yeah.
I did not miss a payment. And honestly, my buddy and I had fairly instant success at our bar, because it was right across from a steel mill where there was 5,700 people working. So, you didn't have to be an MBA to figure out how to make money there. And we made it pretty quickly, but we were young, and, we probably didn't save as much as we should, but making that payment was not a problem. And a few years down the road, we bought the actual building, and we did that on our own because we had accumulated enough to actually buy the building, because we were paying rent also.
You said you didn't have to be an MBA to understand that if you open up a bar across from 5,700 steel workers, that you're going to have relatively fast success.
I equate that to any business, whether it's a bar business or a clothing business. I mean, people want to support people that they know, and the fact of the matter is people that they like. I mean, it's proven every day. It was proven here during COVID, where people came out of the woodwork to support us, where we may not have made it without their support. So
yeah. That's another thing that from doing the interviews for the podcast, there's principles that I have like developed and like truths that I know now that I didn't think of before. And one of those truths is people need people. Like I wasn't, before I started doing the podcast a couple years ago, I wouldn't have been saying that, but I think I was probably 4 or 5 episodes deep into having conversations like this, and like the common thread or theme that kept occurring over them, which was like, I wouldn't have been able to have the success I had without other people supporting me. And that support looked differently for different people. But the fact of the matter is, like, they couldn't have done it by themselves working in isolation.
100%. 100%. I mean, I think all businesses, at least in-person businesses, I've never worked, like I said, I've only worked for myself. So I really don't know how the corporate world works, but
you don't want to know.
I don't want to know. I think all businesses nowadays are based on relationships.
Yeah.
Most of them. Yeah. Whether it's the guy you buy a suit off of, or the guy you have fix your car, or the person that cuts your hair, or the restaurant is your favorite restaurant. It's all based on relationships. And developing those relationships is key to success.
I would agree. I think that it's an undervalued part of doing business. Like, I've worked for some large corporations. I work for a software company now, and we're always trying to prove how much better our software is than somebody else's software. And I come from a wealth management background. That's where an industry where the relationship part of it is valued and recognized. And I'm just like, why don't we just be nicer to these people? Why aren't we doing the things that are going to build better relationships? Like, where are the birthday cards and the Thanksgiving cards and just thinking about you kind of moments, which I think, again, would, like you said, goes a long way in any industry. And I think that's what, like, people want to do business with who they like. And if all things being equal, I'm going to do business with the people who express and show me that they want to be in relationship with me, right? That there's a reciprocal, I like you, you like me, let's continue to do business together or explore doing business together.
100%.
What's the name of the bar and restaurant? I sense there's probably a bit of a story behind that as well.
Well, honestly, it's on its third name. The name right now is Pazzo, P-A-Z-Z-O, which first of all, nobody can say it right. My employees can't even say it right. I don't know why, but they can't. In Italian, that means crazy, because I sometimes think, after these many years, you have to be crazy to still be doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's evolved in kind of a negative way, that industry, well, especially where it's located, has become, there is no more 5,700 steel workers across the street. They've been gone for, 40 some years. So we had to reinvent ourselves, which I think in both of my business, reinvention is another key to success.
Let's pull on that thread for a minute. One of the things that I'm getting from this conversation is you're starting to express things that you know to be true from being in business. And one of those things we just chatted about was that relationships are key. Another one is, if you're going to be in business and be in business for a significant period of time, which you have been, you have to be able to pivot and understand the landscape of the marketplace and then react to it. And if you don't, you either have to adapt or you get left behind. So how have you, in either businesses or both, been able to recognize that you're in one of those moments where you have to either adapt to the changing landscape or likely get left behind?
Well, I'll start with Joseph Orlando Clothier. So as we all know, people, no offense to anybody, but the dress of men has deteriorated over time. All you have to do is go to a restaurant or walk down the street and, but yet our business has been extremely strong. Some days I try to figure out how that could even be, because that doesn't make sense. But, the first adjustment we had to make here was when my dad first opened up, and for the first, however many years before .com came along, the same customers would come in twice a year and they'd buy 3 suits, a blue one, a gray one, a striped one. They'd buy 6 white shirts. They'd buy 6 ties, and they'd get them and they'd walk out the door and wave to you and say, I'll see you in 6 months to do the same thing. And that was a pattern that happened continually. But then when casual Fridays came, we never carried blue jeans, and we started carrying blue jeans, and we never carried many sport jackets. And so we've reinvented ourselves and gone a bunch of different directions. You know, it's not foolproof. I mean, there are seasons where I say we were too light on that particular segment of our business and too heavy on that. I overreacted, and I shouldn't have bought more of that. I should have bought more of that. But that's there's no way to avoid that in the clothing industry. But it's an ever-changing thing. Our business has become now here that we try to provide an experience for people when they come in. You know, we have a bar and a little bourbon place in our corner of our store. Obviously, very little people come in at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and drink bourbon, but on Saturdays they come in, or we do a lot of bachelor wedding parties, and the guys come in, and we try to make it something enjoyable, something more of an experience than walking into a store where nobody knows your name and no one really services you the way that you would want if you're buying a better product. These are all things that, you know, back in 1980s and 90s, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Again, probably bouncing all over the place. In banking, one of the things that astonishes me is if you walk into a branch bank today, a branch bank looks eerily similar to probably, I mean, at least since I started 20 some years ago, but as a kid, you know, 30, 40 years ago. And before that, I imagine they were the same, right? But I guess celebrity entrepreneur Richard Branson, who I like and follow, the founder, creator of like Virgin Brands. Sure. He has, I think they still have it as a business. It's Virgin Money, which is like their version of banking. But their premise is to create an experience for their customers. So like their branch banks, to my understanding, are like coffee lounges where you can go in, have your coffee, and then when you need to go transact money or speak with a banker or speak with a financial advisor, they're going to be ready there to assist you. But I think like adapting to the marketplace and what people expect is they don't expect it to be the same anymore. But if you can provide an experience, especially like you can get a lot of stuff online, like you said, what's going to differentiate you between somebody taking the path of least resistance, sitting on their couch and ordering a suit online or ordering a pair of blue jeans online? If you have the relationship, if you're providing an experience, that's probably going to get me off the couch, go into a store location.
Well, I think, yeah. And honestly, I think that a lot of people aren't looking for a personal relationship. They're not comfortable with that, you know, with that mode. They would rather order something online and have it sent in where there's no personal interaction. And I think as a society, you see that happen a lot. I mean, the building we're in now, there is 21 floors of condominiums above us in apartments. And then we share a lobby, and we have to use the lobby to go to our restroom. Being an older guy, I walk out there and I see like drinks from Uber Eats sitting out there. And somebody ordered a drink a couple weeks ago from the Starbucks, which is, I mean, you can almost throw a baseball and hit it from, like, and it sat there. It sat, and it was a cold drink, and it sat there, and they must have paid $12 for this thing. And it's hard for me to wrap my arms around it. But that person's probably more comfortable doing that than walking to Starbucks and interacting with another person. Our job is when someone comes in here, they've already made a determination that they want an experience.
Yeah. Because
they wouldn't come here if they didn't. So our job is when they come here to make every customer feel like they're our most important customer, regardless if they're buying a tie or buying a $2,500 suit. We treat them the same way. And I think that is something that, and my staff is fantastic at that. They do a great job with that.
You had said, very politely so, I might add, that dress of men has deteriorated over time. I don't want to sound like too worldly, but I think Americans maybe in general, but being a male, I'll speak for males, and my observation of the world is that if you're in an airport in the United States of America and you observe the dress of men, that's going to be significantly more casual to put it politely, than if you just landed in the Charles de Gaulle airport at 5 a.m., which I have done, and have observed how the people in a European airport dress. And I mean, I don't even know how to, like, I think I usually carry myself and like put myself together pretty well, but I'm not going to wear a full suit for an overnight flight, but I am gonna look put together. But like, just even at that, I felt sort of ashamed. So, I mean, maybe just explore some of that for my own personal interest if you've had similar experiences.
Well, I think it's more of a cultural thing, more so than anything, that type of mentality. I deal with a lot of Italian companies, and I've become friends with a lot of these gentlemen that some of them live in Italy. One was just here this spring, and he did an event at our store, and he had never been to a Major League Baseball game. I took him to a baseball game, and he was thrilled about it. But that being said, I mean, the mentality of the people in those countries is just different. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's better. I wouldn't wear a suit to fly on a 10-hour flight if I was going on vacation, but I also wouldn't go to the airport in my pajamas either. So,
Same.
But it's funny when I go to buy these lines from Italy or whatever, I'll walk over and I'll say to Luca, "Hey, that's a beautiful jacket," and he'll go, "No, it's not for the American market." And it's because of the fit and because of the styling. He said, "Yeah, no, you can't buy that." But I really like it. No, you can't buy that. So,
I like that.
Let's take a quick break from today's episode. If you're enjoying the conversation, take a second to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're tuning in. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us on Instagram at Randall Osché. That's RANDALLOSCHE. And check out more at podcast.randallosche.com, including show notes and other resources from today's episode. All right, back to the conversation.
So I've witnessed through your Instagram page, your buying travels, I think, from afar, but I'd be curious to know a little bit more about the men's clothing store, how you go about, I'm assuming it's like seasonal, but I know nothing on the matter. Like, when does the buying process for a summer or winter season start? How do you plan it? Where do you go? Who do you buy it from? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different options. First of all, the challenging part, but I've been doing this for a long time, and it still is a challenge each and every season, is that you buy 9 months ahead of the season. So in July, I was buying clothing that will be shipped into our store in February or March of the following year. The flaw of that is you still have product left over from the spring and summer season that you're in, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, we still have a lot of that left over, but what if we sell it all in the next month, or what if we don't sell any of it in the next month or so? So that's a challenge, but store owners like myself, I mean, we've done it, and that's the trick. Navigation is to try to go into your crystal ball and say, okay, 9 months from this purchase I'm making today, I have to make sure that these are the right products. And the buying system consists of 2 seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter. They're kind of combined into 2 seasons. And usually I'll buy 90% of my clothing at the New York market. But there are shows throughout our country. There's one in Dallas. The biggest one is in Chicago. But I prefer the New York market because it's a little more intimate. It's going from showroom to showroom. The one in Chicago is at a big merchandise mart with 4 floors of vendors, one after another. I prefer the more personal one. And then occasionally I have the luxury of going to Italy on a buying trip, but that isn't as prevalent. That's a treat, yes, usually when I do that.
So it's more of like, oh shucks, I gotta go to Italy for this.
Well, yeah, and vacation on the back end of it, or the front. But the New York shows are and most of the companies we deal with have showrooms up there that they keep or rent at least during the buying season. And, we deal with a lot of artisanal brands. We don't carry a lot of the big name brands that you would see at a Neiman Marcus or a Saks or Nordstrom's. We carry a lot of the smaller brands, which is really where my passion is, because I feel like these things aren't mass produced.
Yeah.
They're artisanal, hence the word. I mean, that's what they are.
I'd like that as well. I imagine over time, like, you've built relationships with certain manufacturers. I'm sure that you have relationships with them where you like go back, seeing what they're making for like this season. But how have you gotten to that point? I mean, that's my assumption. I could be wrong, so correct me if I am. But how have you gotten to the point of, I like these brands for these reasons, and they've treated me well, and their products have, to use a hockey term, they seem to see where the puck is going, not where it's at, and that I know when I purchase their stuff, it's not only good quality, but then my customers are going to appreciate it and actually purchase it instead of passing on it.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things is a lot of the brands we carry are, because they're artisanal brands, they're not as maybe mainstream the name. There is a segment of our population that will buy labels and pay, exorbitant amount of money, and that's their prerogative to do that. Funny thing is, a couple of our brands actually make the clothing for those big brands in the same factory as the big brands, because most of those big labels don't have their own manufacturing facilities. They contract it out. But over the years, it's the same thing. You have relationships. Our relationships with my customers is also, I have relationships with guys that I have, done business with over the years. There's a trust involved. A lot of the Italian companies have agents, and what the agent's job is, they're in Italy, I'm in the United States. The agent's job is kind of the intermediary, and what he does is, number one, he makes sure that what I order, they send to me, and then the agent makes sure that what I get, I pay them. Because with that gap in distance, it would be easy to have fraud and to have people taking advantage of certain situations. So I've had some great relationships. The other thing that happens is, and this happens from time to time, I'll call one of my agents up, or one of my people that I deal with the Italian companies, and I say, look, I bought this jacket off you and I can't sell it. I don't want any money back. And this is something you can't do all the time, but this is something that if you have a relationship, you sometimes can call in a favor. Can I trade that for, these 4 green suits that no one's even tried on, for 4 blue suits? And if they're more, fine, but, and most of them are pretty open to that, as long as you don't abuse that option. I say this to my guys, is when you have relationships and when you treat people right, you win a lot of ties. I always say that.
How many ties have you think you've won over the years?
More than I've lost.
I like that. When you think about big box stores that you had mentioned earlier, and some of the labels that they carry, how much, I don't expect like an exact science answer from you, but what are your thoughts on this perhaps? Like, of the price tag, say it's $1,000 for a suit, but then you say the material alone is like $1,000 for the suit, right? But then you slap a popular, trendy brand name on that suit. How much are you paying for the suit, and then how much are you paying for the trendy name brand that's going on it?
I think in the luxury segment of our business, the markups are, and because we really don't sell that type of product, I think that the markups are huge. In our industry, there is kind of an unwritten rule of the markups, and you don't want to take less than this, but you're being really greedy if you take more than that. There are a lot of brands that we carry that have a suggested retail price, and you can go online and you can find this pair of pants online for $198. Well, if I'm selling them for $250, my customers are pretty smart. They're going to say, why is he selling it for $250? So sometimes you have to go along with the MSRP that a lot of these more well-known brands, advertise. But luxury items are, I've heard stories, and I don't want to denigrate them because they're a vital part of our business, and they make a lot of the products I sell look even better. Like I said, there's a product we carry here in Italy in a family-owned factory, and I've had the salesmen and I've had people I know in the industry say they make their product in the factory right here. You walk down the hallway and it's the same machines and it's the same handwork, and they're making a product and they're using the same techniques.
Yeah.
And for a product that would, one of these, luxury brands, it's probably 5 times as much, but it's not 5 times as much as far as quality and construction.
Yeah. So I guess if I'm understanding this correctly, the margins on what your products are that you're selling are fairer versus some of those other big name brands that might be getting a little bit, not saying that they're greedy yet, but they're on the higher end of the margin spectrum.
Yeah, I think it varies from store to store. I mean, I like to sleep at night, so I don't want to you need to make margin because costs have never been higher. Alteration costs to make, there's a lot of stores that charge for alterations. We do not unless something is 50% off or more. So alteration has to be built into the pricing, but we have to absorb some of that. We can't expect our customers to absorb that cost because they come in here knowing that, okay, you buy something at Joseph Orlando, it's great quality. And not only that, they'll tailor it for you. And not only that, they don't charge you for it. But that cuts into our margin. But that's kind of the way a specialty store business has been constructed over time. I would say that maybe in the future that's going to change because of the dearth of tailors in the world, that's going to have to change someday. Because unless there's a new wave of tailors coming to America, which I don't think there is, there are pockets of them, but there was that big immigration from Italy and from Greece and from London where tailors came to the United States to look for a better life, and there was no problem finding them. Now it's, if you have one, and I have 4 that I use, and I feel like I'm a pretty darn lucky guy because there's a lot of stores that are struggling to find someone to do their work. Because if you sell something, it's like selling a new car and saying, yeah, well, we don't have a mechanic if something goes wrong with it. You're kind of on your own, but thanks for buying this car off of us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not to put you on the spot, but I've always been intrigued about business for the sake of business. I like having these conversations. I like understanding new industries and how it works. But over the course of your entrepreneurship journey, maybe what are some principles, and we've discussed some here today, but what are some of the principles or things that you know to be true about business that if you were to teach a seminar about business, what would some of those principles be that you'd want to get across?
Well, again, there's men's clothing industry. There's a store, it's probably one of the most renowned stores in the U.S., and it's called Mitchell's. They're based in Westport, Connecticut, and they've bought many other big name stores throughout the country. They're a very, very successful group. And the owner of that company wrote a book, and he kind of made it famous. And the name of his book was Hug Your Customers. And I think, I've never really emulated that, but I think he hits the head on the nose that, you have to make every customer feel important. You have to make them feel that you really appreciate them supporting your business. You have to tell them thank you. You have to remember their name. You have to remember their kid's name, and their kids plays basketball. You ask them how his season's going. These are all things that you would ask your friend or your cousin, and I think you have to treat your customers that way. One of the lessons I've learned that really stuck with me, getting back to owning both businesses, I would always tell anybody that would want to listen that I have a clothing business in downtown Pittsburgh. We have a lot of customers. We have a lot of well-to-do customers. I have a bar and restaurant in a pretty rough end of town. And I would say to many people that I feel lucky, and I've learned a lot because I could actually in the daytime take care of a CEO, and at nighttime have a person that's virtually homeless in my bar. I've had guys in my bar that were homeless that I would give them food to eat. And that sometimes would occur on the same day. I have people to always talk about if you live in LA or California, you can go snow skiing or water skiing in the same day. I can talk to a CEO and talk to a homeless person in the same day, and they can both be my customers. And I think that has always stuck with me, and kept me appreciative and grounded of all customers.
Yeah.
So.
I like that. You mentioned the Mitchell's book, but perhaps it's that one, but what's the most influential book you've ever read?
Well, unfortunately, Randall, I have to make a confession that because running a couple businesses, I don't I don't really read as much as I would like. I just can't find the time. And
It's fun.
my focus is when I read, sometimes I'll read the same paragraph 3 times. And so it's not something that comes easily or naturally to me. I wish it did. But I think, a lot of success is based in my business is if you have a passion about something. When I first started in the clothing business and my dad asked me to come in, I did not really have a passion for it. Over the years, I have developed a great passion for it, and I've really embraced it and enjoy it now more than ever. And I enjoy the challenge. I always tell people when you own your own business, every day you start at 0 and you try to get as far away from 0 as you can. That's your goal every day. Some days we get really far from 0 and some days we don't.
Fair enough. What's one piece of advice that you'd give your younger self?
It's always easy to go look back and say, should I have done that? Should I have done that? Should I have gone to college? I didn't go to college. I'm a high school graduate. Should I have gone to college? But I learned a lot of life lessons that maybe they wouldn't have taught me in college by owning my own business at a fairly young age. And, made mistakes and learned from my mistakes in real time. I think that there are risks that I didn't take that maybe if I would have gone back and had a chance to do it over again, that maybe I would have taken a risk. At the time, I think I had 2 young kids, and it's not a good time to take a risk if you have that. But if you don't, and you're young and you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to start your own thing, do it while the risk, there's always risk in anything we do. But when you have less people counting on you, I think it makes the ability to take a risk easier.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And I think sometimes people get intimidated by taking risks, but I think if you just think about the potential upside and then think about the potential downside, oftentimes the downside's not as bad as you think it is if you think through it. Yeah. My most influential book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He wrote another book that is titled How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And in that book, my biggest takeaway from it was how to make a decision. And the reason I like his writing is because he isn't talking theory or hypothesis. He writes about real life people and their journey through a scenario. And so he talked about, one of the examples was a business tycoon. He could buy anything he wanted, but he was so stressed all the time that he was dying of stomach ulcers. And he didn't start to get better until he just said, F it, and started living his life. And then all of a sudden, his health shot up from nearly dying to living a vibrant life. But one of the hacks, if you will, in the book is one of the people he writes about was what's the worst thing that's going to happen here? And they went through a checklist of negative consequences. Sure. One of those things was is anybody going to die? And oftentimes when in life, when we're faced with these decisions of risk, nobody's going to die. So my hack, I just short circuit the list. I just jump to number 5 and I'm is anybody going to die? Nobody's going to die. It's not that serious. Let's make the decision and let's move forward. And people think it's a bit cavalier or edgy or sharp language of me. When I'm having conversations, just let's cut through this fluff. Is anybody going to die? No. Let's try it and move on, because the upside significantly outweighs the downside. So I think that my perspective is just oftentimes I think a lot of people can get in their head about risks or making decisions. But if you think through it is one thing, but if you actually write it out, I think is also really helpful to assess the potential upside versus the downside. And oftentimes the downside is not nearly as bad as you emotionally think that it is. I think that will help.
Yeah, just to give you a quick short story on what you just said about no one died. So about a year ago, a good client who also was a friend bought a suit off me to go to an out-of-town wedding. And, nobody's perfect. We screwed up, and we forgot to hem his pants on his suit. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. So he got to his destination, and he called me on the phone, and he said, "Hey, what the hell happened? My pants aren't hemmed. They're 6 inches too long, and what am I going to do? I'm up here in the mountains. I don't know. There's no tailors around here." And to make a long story short, his wife taped the pants I mean, he bought this beautiful suit to wear to this wedding from Joe Orlando, and he's taping the bottom of his pants because we screwed up.
Yeah.
I was sick about it. I mean, I was like distraught. It ruined my weekend. And I called him. I figured I'm going to call him after the wedding just to offer my apologies. And the great guy that he is, he said, Joe, nobody died. Don't worry. He said, I still love you. And I just laughed. But that's when you said that, I remember,
Yeah. I mean, I think it puts things in perspective, too.
Of course.
Like, I think relating back to your story about you can, in the one business, serve a CEO, and in the other business, provide a meal for somebody who's almost homeless or homeless, is like, I bet that does keep you grounded, like you said. But, one of the things I often say to myself is that on your worst day is somebody else's best day. And I think that puts a lot of things in perspective, too. Like, you'd be struggling about, I'm not where I want to be financially or XYZ, but like, what a great problem to have. Like, what a great problem to have.
I mean, I see that happen a lot. Being downtown, there's a lot of sites that are here now that, are more prevalent than there were. I mean, there's a day a few weeks back, we had a really lousy day here, and just business was bad. A couple things went wrong, and I'm walking to my car, and I'm pretty bummed out and disgusted. And I'm usually a pretty optimistic person, and I'm walking there and complaining, and I see a blind couple crossing the street, trying to cross the street. And I said to myself, you dumb fill in the blank. Like, what are you worried about? You had a bad day, so you get to go tomorrow and try to have a good day. Yeah. Got to keep things into perspective.
Yeah, I like that. Joe, I can't thank you enough for being...
I can't thank you. It's been really nice to talk to you. I'm glad you're doing well. Where are you?
I'm in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the forgotten part. I'm on the Panhandle, so I'm actually Central Time. Okay. And everybody that I have so many conversations are like, oh, I used to say I'm in Florida. Everybody would think Fort Lauderdale, Miami. And then I would say the other side of Florida, people like, oh, Clearwater, Tampa. And I was like, no, Southern Alabama, Florida. I'm in the Panhandle.
I was there once. It was nice. Destin, I was there once. It was a beautiful...
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, beautiful beach, beautiful place. Very nice.
It is. The beaches are great. The weather's great. The thing that it lacks, though, is a bit of civilization for me, if I'm being honest. I love the weather. I hate the cold weather. But probably this winter sometime, I'm going to be back up in the Northeast.
Well, if you ever come our way, come in and say hello.
Oh, certainly will.
I would appreciate that, man.
Where can the listeners find you at personally, like whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, or any sort of social accounts or websites that you want people to check out? Yeah,
I mean, you can find me on our Instagram page. You can DM me on the Instagram page or LinkedIn or my email. I mean, I don't know about giving out an email.
Yeah, we won't do that.
That is, but if you go on the store website, anything, if you ever anybody has any questions or fashion questions, I get them all the time. Always happy to answer them and guide someone through an emergency where no one's going to die. Okay.
Yeah. Quick fashion question for you. I have a friend, and I think he looks at me as like the fashion forward friend of our group, or maybe he just does it to make me feel better. But he actually texted me yesterday. He's going to a black tie wedding, but the description for the wedding was a bit unclear.
That happens a lot.
So he had screenshotted a picture of dress shoes that he was considering buying, and they were black wingtips, but with like a white bottom, like a white sneaker bottom.
Like a sneaker type. I have a pair of them today. Yeah.
If it's a black tie formal wedding, would your advice be that sneaker bottom shoe is okay, or to go with a more traditional wingtip shoe?
Is he wearing a tuxedo, or is he just wearing a black suit?
Black suit.
Okay, so one of our shoe companies makes a velvet sneaker that's geared to wear with tuxedos, with the white sole, with the white bottom sole. I would say in his instance, if he feels confident wearing those shoes with the white sole, they're not going to throw him out of there. Okay, they're not going to say you can't come into the wedding. But if he has a pair of nice black dress shoes with a leather sole or a tonal sole, that's probably a safer bet. Well, I don't always dress safe, and I like when people go outside their comfort zone a little bit. That's my job, is to take them outside of their comfort zone at times. And so, if he has a black suit on, he's probably going to wear a black tie, a white shirt, Actually, I saw a formal event on TV. I was watching TV last night or maybe I saw it on social media, where Garrett Cole, pitcher for the Pirates, was at some gala, and he had a tuxedo on and a pair of Nike shoes, which I thought looked kind of silly myself, but I think your buddy's option is better than that.
Yeah. I mean, you said it much better than I said it, but I took the more conservative approach. My advice was just go with a traditional, like, leather bottom, wingtip black shoe if you have it. But I like your advice too. If you're confident and rock it, they're not going to kick you out.
Yeah, exactly. If you feel confident wearing it, I think by all means, sometimes it just sets you apart from everybody else. And some people aren't comfortable doing that, and other people want to do that. So I don't know how your buddy is, but I don't think you can make a bad choice there.
I think my buddy is just looking for comfort.
Yeah, man. I mean, that shouldn't be dismissed either.
Yeah. Joe, great conversation. Thank you so much for the time and making this happen today.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I had to cancel a couple times, but business gets in the way sometimes, but it was a real pleasure talking to you. I wish you all the best going forward.
You too, Joe. Take care.
Always a pleasure, man. Thank you. Take care.
Yeah. See ya.
And that wraps up today's conversation on the Randall Osché Podcast. Thanks again to our guest for sharing their time, knowledge, and lessons with us. If the episode brought you any value, the best way to support the show is to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform. That helps us reach more people like you. You can also visit podcast.randallosché.com for blog posts, full transcripts, and other episode resources. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep moving forward.